everybody, Marco Pucci here. This summer, the world's attention is going to be focused on one country, and that's South Africa. The country will be hosting the World Cup, which is obviously a major global event, and it's really exciting for a lot of us in this field in terms of corporate social responsibility, cause marketing. What are companies going to do to really take a stand in the country in terms of showing it, firstly, as a viable market, but secondly, addressing some of the social needs and issues that exist in the country. Um, I had an opportunity, there's a blogger who's been following this very closely. His name's John Kim. I had an opportunity to sit down with him, and I'll let him share some of what he's been able to find on the topic.
My name is John Kim. Currently, I work in the CSR field for Herman Miller, doing their kind of CSR brand marketing. But previously, I had worked in mostly the nonprofit, either internationally or domestically in the U.S., the kind of food security area. But my interest in CSR on the World Cup is just having lived in South Africa and spent a good amount of time there, and in some other countries, just seeing the power of sport and soccer in particular to bring people together. I just knew that I was just curious about what was happening in South Africa around kind of lead up to the World Cup. The World Cup is the world's most viewed event. About 26 billion people watch the Germany World Cup, apparently. It's huge dollars involved, big sponsors, big corporate sponsors, and I was just curious about, what companies are doing to utilize either CSR initiatives or just what are they doing to both take advantage of the huge kind of marketing opportunity in the country and I'd say the continent as a whole, but also what are they doing to contribute to leaving a lasting legacy in South Africa for the World Cup? Because as I just done some research and knew that these huge events like the World Cup or the Olympics, like Summer Olympics especially, there's been a bad track record of not necessarily the most kind of beneficial legacy for those either cities or countries, even though on the front end there's always humongous promises of social development, infrastructure development, like a lot of benefits to the places hosting these events, but it doesn't always pan out that way. So I wanted to see what companies are doing to contribute to that not happening in South Africa. Yeah, and I mean, South Africa, due to more requirements of having a certain number of facilities and stadiums, I mean they've spent huge amounts of dollars with leveraging a lot of government spending to put these things together. So I mean that's definitely one risk is what's going to happen with these huge structures, especially those outside of the major cities. Like how are they going to what sort of value are they going to bring to communities or especially smaller cities in the long run? And I'd be very curious to know how some of that has been either thought of within the planning process, because I mean that especially with the World Cup, it spans the entire country. There's a lot of money going into infrastructure improvements, such as I think a train system that's going to improve public transport in the Johannesburg and Pretoria area, which is about 30 miles apart. Things like that are will definitely be helpful in the long run. But these things like stadiums, the one in Johannesburg, they built like a 94,000 person stadium. Like, I'd be very curious to know what plans are in the long run of how they'll just continue to add value to the economy, to people who live there, that sort of thing. I mean, part of the good thing of having to build these stadiums is it's employed a lot of people, but it's again a short term, almost building like a false economy of just providing jobs that are definitely have an end in sight. So I don't know. I mean, that's definitely one of the big risks of having these huge events, especially
Right.
World Cup, which takes up spans a whole country rather than Olympics that span is all in one kind of central to one city, where I think they, at least I was aware with Chicago Olympics bid, there was a lot of planning and thought put into how structures could be integrated into the communities they were located in. Well, I this is about maybe in April, or actually probably for the last like year and a half or so. I'd just been thinking about, I was kind of talking to people and just doing some research and thinking about, our companies both seeing the marketing potential as well as, potential to do kind of help leave a lasting legacy in the country. What are they doing anything? What are they doing? Are they thinking about, this event in those terms? Couldn't find anything. Started reading a whole bunch about kind of sports and development, kind of these huge events and kind of national identity and all these sort of things. But I couldn't find anything, so I just started a blog. It was my first blog I ever did, to kind of just have a place for me to kind of collect my thoughts and also collect, if I saw relevant articles where I could connect some dots, just have something up there. There was no intention for it to become more of a public thing, really. It was more for myself, and then if there are people who are interested, that'd be great. It was mostly a place for me to kind of leave my thoughts and talk about, I guess just have somewhere to write about these sort of things I was thinking about. In terms of trends, I see mostly it's kind of a low-hanging fruit thing where I think companies where they're able to see partnerships with building fields or working with kind of education groups or nonprofits. I see some of those. I don't see really any kind of more innovative, connections between what a company, say a corporation, does. Like for example, like Hyundai or Kia. I really could have seen them doing something to help in the transportation infrastructure. Makes sense for them, right? They're trying to become a bigger player in Africa. So I don't see things like that. I see kind of the lower, kind of easier things. In terms of the largest players, I'd say they're mostly the big actual official sponsors, which include Hyundai, Kia, Coca-Cola, Adidas, Visa, Sony, Emirates Airlines, as well as Budweiser, MTN, which is it's a global but South Africa based telecom company, Castrol, the oil company, Continental, Satyam, which is an Indian kind of IT, sort of like an IBM, and then McDonald's, who's been, I think, involved with the World Cup for a long time. So I'd say they're the biggest players, but in terms of what, and I'd also include outside of sponsors, like say Nike and Puma, who are, they're both going to be trying to be involved in the event somehow. But what's kind of tricky is that FIFA, who's the governing body of the event, has really, and I assume it's because these sponsors are paying a lot of money to be a sponsor, but they have pretty strict rules against ambush marketing. So basically, really policing what outside, I guess, what other brands can be involved in any sort of marketing efforts, or even in being in the physical location of, say, a stadium or kind of the fan zones or whatever. What other brands who aren't sponsors can be, kind of how close they can be. So it's kind of interesting. It would be interesting to see how, say, Nike and Puma kind of leave their mark, because they won't be allowed to do the traditional, advertising around the event that they might normally do otherwise, just because of these rules. So that's where I see, some sort of CSR related event initiatives can really be beneficial to these kind of outside brands, the brands that aren't sponsors, because it might be a good way for them to indirectly reap the benefits from from the event in terms of just audience, just having a huge audience that could see what they're doing.